Welcome to the Free Flowing Health Podcast, where we invite you to embark on a transformative journey towards a healthier, happier, more fulfilling life. Each episode brings you a dynamic exploration of the diverse aspects of health, wellness, and healing. I'm your host, Lisa Brown. Join me as I engage in intimate conversations with inspirational guests who share their unique stories and insights. These conversations will take you beyond conventional thinking, encouraging you to break free from the constraints of a one-size-fits-all healing approach. Our mission is to empower you with the knowledge, tools, and motivation needed to inspire real change. Are you ready? Let's dive in. Welcome to the Free Flowing Health Podcast, everyone. Today's guest is near and dear to my heart and an inspiration to many. He's a physical therapist assistant, physical trainer extraordinaire, Spartan race ambassador, lifestyle coach, and owner and operator of Sea Me Paddle, a small local business here in Southwest Florida, and happens also to be my life partner. So welcome to the show, Joe Boris. Can you please add anything that I might have missed?
Thank you, Lisa. I don't think you missed anything, really. I'm here. I'm happy to be here and talk with you about my journey so far.
Yes, and today we're going to dive deep into the topic of living healthfully with cystic fibrosis, which you were born with. It's a genetic condition, which you're going to explain to the audience what it is in just a moment. But I would like to say that it's incredibly just shocking when our friends and acquaintances learn that you're dealing with this and have no clue that it's been a part of your life for such a long time. And I know that there's many variations out there, but it is something that requires a lot of your time and attention as far as daily routine is concerned, and keeping up with doctor's appointments, traveling a couple of hours to Miami a few times a year. So I would love if you can just talk a little bit about what cystic fibrosis is.
Yeah, it's funny because a lot of people they don't know that I have it because I do manage it very well. But if anybody knows somebody with cystic fibrosis, most of the time they see this sick person. They see somebody who has difficulty breathing. They're always coughing, hacking stuff up. A lot of kids will spend a lot of time in the hospital throughout their lives as they're growing up because they just can't clear this mucus out of their lungs. Cystic fibrosis is a genetic disorder that typically affects the lungs primarily, but also the digestive system. And what happens is that when you inherit these the two genes, one from each parent, it affects the gene encoding called the cystic fibrosis transmain conductor regulator, or CFTR protein. And with that, it starts to involve the production of sweat, digestive fluids, and mucus. If that CFTR protein is not functional, secretions that are usually thin instead become thick. That causes that stickiness and gunkiness in the lungs and the pancreas, affecting the breathing and making it so difficult to get air to the body, to the cells. So a lot of kids can't participate or be that active. They're not that active. So we see general poor body growth. They don't grow very well. Combine that with the inability to get enzymes from the pancreas, again, because those ducts, the enzymes travel out of the pancreas to the stomach, are blocked, so they can't digest their food properly. So there's malabsorption of nutrition, so they don't grow very well. Growing up, we were told, feed, eat, get this kid plump and happy. And that's what we did. And that all went very well.
That explains your healthy appetite and why you're in love with a private chef.
I think you're exactly right. I hadn't thought about it before, but yeah, you're probably right. That's why I think that I have a very healthy appetite, because I'm used to just eating. Also, I have to take enzymes to digest my food. So that was always and still is always a little bit of an awkward situation where I go into my pocket anytime I'm eating and take a handful of pills. Like, people see somebody grab or take a handful of pills and they automatically think, what is this guy taking? And
right. Because your body cannot function without those enzymes. What happens if, and I know you don't do this because of the consequences, what happens if you're stranded and you have no enzymes and you needed to eat? Like, what would happen to your body if you did that?
Well, I've experimented a little bit with this to see what would happen or see how I could manage it. Sometimes I'll just go hungry. First of all, like if I know that I can get back to the meds eventually or sooner than later, or the next day, fine. But I have been in situations where I felt like I need to eat and I don't have my enzymes, so I I went with something like salad, and I topped it with very non-fatty foods. The biggest issue that I have, or that most of us have, I believe, is going to be with fatty foods and oils. When you don't take the medicine and you eat something, you see all that fat come out in the stool. Like it's very gross. But
It's not a pleasant experience, obviously. But and before we jump into the rest of your daily routine, can you take me back just to childhood? How old were you when you got the diagnosis, and just briefly discuss what that was like for your family and what it was like growing up?
I was 3 years old when I was diagnosed, and as I was just mentioning, the way that they started to wonder is that I was getting I was very upset and poor stomach, my stomach aches and foul stools, oily stools, diarrhea. And that took me to the doctor. We did a sweat test. That was the classic test they still do today to see if I had increased sodium in my sweat. So that naturally came back with high salt in my sweat. And then they said, well, now we've got to do the gene test and find out, is this actually CF or is this going to be, and it was.
And how was the reaction of your parents when they discovered this? I know obviously you were just a baby and you have additional siblings. You're the oldest of four, so they weren't even born yet, right?
Well, I think you just answered the question there. Yeah, I'm the oldest of
Like
four.
I thought of that.
I
Hello.
don't know. I know I was 3 years old, so my next sister was either born. I don't remember if
Well,
she was born yet or not.
either way, just putting it into perspective, at that time, you were the only child to your parents, a little tiny baby. And I can imagine that this news, especially not having this deep understanding of what cystic fibrosis was quite shocking. So, how did they deal with this? And, what was that like then growing up from the age of 3 when you received that diagnosis
Yeah,
until adulthood?
I can't answer how they felt and how they dealt with managed it on on their mental side and their end, but they dived full on in with learning everything that they could to treat this and to give me the best outcome. They learned how to provide percussion therapy treatments where they would put me on my belly or put me in different positions and cup or kind of slap with cupped hands on my back and my ribs on my side to break up the mucus in my lungs and clear it out. There's a specific physical therapist do this, and respiratory therapists do this with patients, with children to help clear them out. So nowadays they include physical therapists in the CF teams to help show the parents how to provide this treatment. They obviously got all the enzymes that they needed. Fortunately, my dad was a police officer with good government insurance. That sounds like an oxymoron, doesn't it? So we were well covered. We were well covered to handle this. And fortunately for me, and I feel bad for those that don't have that, because certainly there's thousands and thousands of people who don't. But they tackled it full on. They gave me the best chance that they could, and I'm very grateful for that, because it really did help establish a good ground up tackle this thing from the ground up.
Yeah, I'm so happy that they took the warning signs seriously, got you checked out, and then educated themselves and became truly aware and then present to the situation. So at that age, in addition to the cupping and the doctor's visits and the testing, did you already have a daily routine? Were you already taking enzymes? What else was part of what you needed to
Yeah.
do on a daily basis?
So we did the breathing treatments usually through a nebulizer, as kind of a mat. You put a little face mask on, or you have a little mouthpiece that you just kind of bite on and suck the gas through, if you will. It's a medication that you inhale and it gets into your lungs to help open up the airways, first of all, and then they can do other ones that are antibiotics or more to reduce the thin out the mucus as well, like sodium chloride. I always think about that, like filling your lungs with a little bit of salt gas, much the way that the classic trick at the bar would be, where you put a little salt on your little drink napkin so that the wet glass doesn't stick to the napkin. You line up your airways with a little bit more saltiness, and it keeps that mucus from sticking to it. I don't know if that's actually correct or not, but that's the way I kind of saw it. We did this little sodium chloride, which at first breath, first pull, think about just inhaling a bunch of salt gas. It's not fun. And I'll be honest with you, that as I grew older became harder to keep in my regimen. And but it's something I had to do. I had to come back to eventually because I did start to have decreased lung functions. And also, when I was younger, I remember very specifically my doctor saw in my sinuses the growth of polyps. And he said, this is something that we have to either address now with some sinus sprays, and the typical things are immediately.
And what are polyps? Sorry, just to
Oh,
interject.
yes. Polyps are little growths in the sinus cavities, little balloon type growths.
Non-benign, benign, I mean.
Benign,
Sorry,
yeah,
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 not malignant.
benign. Yep, no. So as a kid, I did not want to have surgery. That sounded really scary. So I would start doing the little spray up the nose. That was awful. I didn't like that at all either. I didn't keep doing it too much.
And
And
was that
then
common with in all kids with cystic fibrosis, the polyps?
I'm not sure,
Okay,
but it is. I don't know how prevalent it is, but
right.
it is like sinus issues are
And they're like
amongst
related to
and
it.
they're
Okay.
related to it. Yeah.
And so take us to the point in your life then you had to get these polyps removed, and just then speak to like the continuation of this routine throughout your life and what you still do on a daily basis. Just paint that picture for people.
Yeah, that was way later. I was an adult when I had the polyps removed. They were there throughout, and I don't know that well, what they ended up what led me to get them removed was daily sinus headaches. I would get them as a child fairly. I don't know how often, but I remember getting them, and I would just have pain behind my eye. I would tell my mom I've got this pain behind my eye, and she would say that's a sinus headache because that's where your sinuses are. They're right above your eyeballs, above the orbitals. There's right below the eyes as well. So then I didn't know how to treat those as a kid. We would just take medication, take Advil, Tylenol, or something like that, and let it go away. It got to the point as an adult when I was working as a physical therapist that every day around 11 a.m., this thing would come on and it would last till about 2:30, 3 o'clock. And it made it very difficult to think and function. I had to just suffer through it, and I did. Finally, I saw the ENT, ear, nose, and throat specialist, and he saw the polyps. He said, we got polyps and we'll take them out. So we did. We took them out, had surgery. Obviously, by this time, surgery's still scary, but it wasn't a kid. I knew and was at a point where I couldn't live like this any longer. And we started doing sinus rinses. So I still daily do that sinus rinse. We added, and this is just for my use. I don't know that anybody that's out there dealing with it should speak to their doctor first. But I am a big advocate for sinus rinses, whether it's just the saline. I use also a Nacia oil that you turned me on to replace the old additive that I was using, which was Johnson & Johnson baby shampoo, just a little drop in there as recommended by the doctor, as I saw it, to clean out and flush out the sinuses. I actually split it into two separate rinses. I would rinse it with the first saline and soap, and then I would rinse it a second time with the added medication. At first, he put a very strong antibiotic compound that I would actually pull the capsule apart and dump it in, and budesonide. That is again another. It's usually an inhaled or a nebulized medication that I was just dumping into my sinus rinse so that I would help to open up those sinuses. I still use the budesonide. I no longer use the antibiotic because it's very strong and you don't want to just continue to blast your body with antibiotics. And it keeps my sinuses feeling much better. The polyps grew back. The doctor said they aggressively returned weeks after surgery, a couple months after surgery, but the headaches have not come back. Thank God.
Okay, yeah. So you made it through that. And what does your daily routine look like now from, taking certain medications and also implementing these things that you've been doing since childhood? Just,
The daily routine starts getting up and I grab water first thing. It's very important to stay hydrated. Again, this mucus gets very thick, very sticky, and if you don't have enough water, you're not going to supply that, you're not going to have enough fluids to thin that out as much as you can. Your body, remember, will uses your fluids for the vital organs or the most necessary uses and functions first, and then everything else gets whatever's left over. So good amounts of water first thing in the morning. I add salt to that water, a little pink Himalayan sea salt. I add also a little bit of lemon to the water to get more nutrients, especially using a reverse osmosis or a very purified water that depletes the water of everything that's in there. You usually want to put a little, you want to what do you call it?
Remineralize.
Remineralize that water. That I think is great for anybody. Then I will have a little bit of coffee, but then it's rinse out the sinuses. So water, sinus rinse, and they've developed a new medication called Trikafta. And now this one has been very interesting because it helps to modify that CFTR gene or CFTR protein that has been the driver behind or the lack thereof of working through this disease. So Trikafta is it's a 2-dose medication where I take 2 in the morning and 1 at night. Has to be taken with food, fatty food. So that kind of makes it a little bit difficult for me
Along
to do
with
my
the
fast.
enzymes.
I take the enzymes every single time I eat. That never changed. But so on those, and for me, the Trikafta has been somewhat helpful, but again, like we haven't really talked about my PFTs or anything like that yet, and really like how my even childhood into adulthood came along. But this Trikafta has been very, very effective for a lot of people, for many, many, many people with cystic fibrosis, increasing their pulmonary function scores from 30% to the 50s, 60s, 70s, making them very functional people.
So part of your morning routine, also nighttime routine.
Also, nighttime routine. Yeah.
And
The last thing on the Trikafta I do want to say is that I do know people who are very allergic or just do not handle that medication well or do not handle components of that medication. So, again, it has to be something and would be something the doctor would recommend or I'm sorry, would prescribe. And hopefully by the point that the doctor did that, they would already know if you did not tolerate these ingredients in the meds very well.
then you also do the sinus rinse as well as a nebulizer in the morning as
The
part of your
nebulizer in the
routine.
morning too, yes. So to make it easier, I bought a portable nebulizer, battery operated. I've got 2 different ones, the Flip and then the Aura. I prefer the Aura. It's pop the AA batteries in there. I have to constantly change those batteries out because once it runs low or starts, it very quickly runs low, and then those treatments go from 5 minutes to like 30 minutes to get all the medicine out. The other one has been very useful as a pod haler because now I'm using tobimycin, and the other one is pulmozyme, dealing with one of the other chronic things that happen or people get are little infections, little colonizations of bacteria in the lungs. So I have a Pseudomonas colonization as well as a Staph aureus colonization. So these 2 medications help keep those guys at a relatively low harm rate because these things do continue to grow. Obviously, they're occupying space in my lungs. They're going to tear them up. They're going to scar them up and lead to lung damage and issues in the future. And so I use this little Toby pod haler because it is a little, I don't know what you'd call it, but it looks like almost like a little, or like a big bullet. But you pop a little capsule in there, you put the cap on, and you push the button on the bottom, and then you just. I should have had it. I should have had it in here to do a treatment right here on the on the show. But it basically is just a little powdery mist. So instead of hooking up to this nebulizer, which turns the liquid into vapor that you inhale, this powder comes out almost like smoke and goes right into the lungs, and your lungs absorb that and then helps to kill down or beat down these infections.
Right.
So I do that in the car on the way to work. For whatever reason, it sounds like, oh, we'll just sit down and do this for a couple minutes every day. Like that's one of the craziest things that I can't. And anybody I'm sure with CF will probably relate to the trying to sit down and just do that multiple times a day. It sucks. Like who wants to take the time or sit down and do that? Now, maybe that's just me.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And I imagine it does become second nature, but it's not without struggle or challenge, especially probably as a younger kid, and then even into adulthood, having to remember to not only bring your enzymes, but to take them, to make sure you don't leave the house without doing the nasal rinse, to ensure that you're hydrating and remineralizing your system. And let me make sure that I'm taking my morning and nighttime medication. Oh shit, I forgot my breathing treatment, and now I have to wait until the afternoon. So it is a lot. And I know that you've been doing this now for 36 years, obviously, because you're 39. And I thank you for that, painting that picture of what cystic fibrosis is. And I know there's different variations, and some people need lung transplants and deal with even greater struggle. But I do want to highlight the fact that you're like one of the most athletic, inspirational people that I've met. And this is why a lot of people are shocked when they hear that this is something that you're dealing with, not only from childhood, but still, into adulthood, and that you are in really great shape. You've been very athletic throughout your life. You train really hard. You take care of your health. I know it wasn't always that way. We're going to, dive a little bit into your story. But now I just want to say that you truly, live this life that when people see you on social media or they meet you and they have no effing clue because of all the things that you're doing, which is so motivational for anybody that might have a similar variation that you have, and maybe just feeling that they can't achieve this or they can't do that or they can't fit in and they'll never be normal and nobody will ever understand. I think just creating this awareness and making yourself available to connect with the people out there and be this true source of inspiration is so important. It's an important part of your life mission and your path. But I would love for you to discuss now how it wasn't always easy and growing up as a rebellious teenager, like a lot of us experiment as is, but especially living this way and feeling like an outcast, but wanting to really just do what the other kids did, where that led you and how that was a big part of your story. And you don't have to give all of the details, but just describe a little bit about what that was like and where that led you before you began to really take your health seriously and make lifestyle changes and really embrace your health.
Certainly, yeah. There's several. There's this part of my story is very, very big to me, and I think what I look at, like, I feel driven to work with, reach out, talk to, help people with cystic fibrosis, but I don't know exactly where that is, and I feel like the big part of that is going to be is going to relate to my struggle with alcohol and drug abuse or drug use. Because growing up as we all do, we all want to fit in. We all want to have friends. We all want to do what everybody else is doing. And that to me was something that drove me to be so athletic, to do everything the other kids do. And I remember very specifically something that my dad told me that pushed me even harder. I was playing football at the time, and he said, "Joe, people with cystic fibrosis don't play football." And that stuck with me, and I took that and applied it across the board. People with cystic fibrosis don't do a lot of things that normal people do or other people do. I was doing all of it, and I wanted to continue to do all of it. Naturally, as I became a teenager at 16 years old, had my first experiment with pot, followed a week later by alcohol, and I thought that's what everybody else was doing. That's what a lot of people were doing, certainly, but I don't think everybody. I mean, looking back and or talking through our high school peers, I'm sure not everybody really jumped into it. And if they did, they didn't keep doing it. But my personality was to, oh yeah, I can do this. My CF doesn't hold me back. I can play football, basketball, run. I can drink. I could smoke, and I could party. And of all the things, like, of course, this was back in the year 2000 or whatever, where edibles weren't as big and common as they are now. I had even had the doctor tell me at one point, well, why don't you just eat it? If you want to do marijuana, why don't you just eat it?
I didn't know that part. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's, it doesn't hit the same, first of all, but really, I was so like, I wanted to be normal, or I wanted to just be able to do everything else and show that I could do everything else. Now, I started partying. I was partying for 19 years, probably, drinking, smoking pot, some various other things in between, but those were the two biggies. And I was very guilty about it the whole time. I knew that when you drink alcohol, especially as much as I would drink at times, your body filtrates that through all of your cells, especially through the lungs. Like you can smell it on your breath for a very long time. That's why they do a breathalyzer. And your liver has to also filter everything through. So these organs that are already at risk are now being saturated with alcohol. So that's not good. And I knew that wasn't good, but I also kind of put that to the back of my mind and said, well, it's also not really that. It's not like it's not a big deal. But the other thing would be the pot, smoking the pot. Now that was probably makes me feel even more guilty about it. But the big thing was that I, for years, was walking around living and partying with this guilt, knowing that every drink I took, knowing that every blunt I smoked was a bad idea, was unhealthy and putting my life at risk. But I kept doing it anyway until finally I came to an end, and
Well, I know that you had a couple of aha moments, as most of us do, to really wake you and shake you so that you can begin to then transform your life. So, if you just want to speak about the couple of experiences that you had briefly that you set you on a different path, with the doctors reporting on your health results and giving you some information and news, but then also beyond that, you had a struggle with, as you mentioned, addiction and alcohol, and how it took a little while for you to like finally give it up forever, but there was a couple incidences, or
yeah,
I can let you speak to
yeah,
that really set the course of your life and set you on a new path.
yeah. So as I was as a child growing up, we mentioned the routines, going to the doctors every year, several times a year. Where I grew up, we didn't have a doctor close by. That's why I had to drive 2 hours or travel 2 hours away to the
And you
doctor.
still do.
And I still do. Yeah, we still don't have specialists here in Southwest Florida. But to go when you go in, they do a PFT, a pulmonary function test, to see how well your lungs are functioning. As a child, before party days, I was always in the top 90 to 100+% and functioning great. Doctor says, "Boy, you're really doing well. Keep it up. You should be they even told me you should leave a pretty normal life." So I kind of use that as fuel to do everything that everybody else did, which included drinking and smoking and
Drink
all the
more,
party.
smoke
Yeah.
more, party harder.
Normal life, right. Now, that is not a normal life. I realized now that that's not normal. Like that is abnormal. That is abuse, that is alcoholism, that is addiction. So what we started to see, and actually I can't even say we started to see it because I didn't go to the doctor for most of my 20s. When I became an adult, I had to go to the adult cystic fibrosis team. I had to transition from the pediatric to the adults, and I went maybe twice, and then that was it. It took me all the way until my early 30s to go back, and I went back because I was afraid that if I didn't have an established team in my corner, that I was eventually going to have problems. Now I knew I was creating my own problems, so I went in and saw them, and we started doing the PFTs again. And what used to be hundreds and plus were now low 90s, and the next time I saw them, they were lower 80s. And as every time I went back in, these things were getting worse and worse. And this is when I was still partying and misbehaving. So that was starting to really scare me. And I was afraid that if I didn't do something, that that it was just gonna continue to get bad. I also had an incident that took me before I even went back to them. I was having some pains and issues that I wound up with a CAT scan, found out I had chronic pancreatitis, or scarring of my pancreas, which they called chronic pancreatitis. I didn't have that pain resolved and went away and was not a problem anymore, but the chronic pancreatitis remains, hence chronic. It's scarring. There's already some damage, and they called it mild. So I looked it up and tried to figure out what is chronic pancreatitis. What should I expect? And I asked the doctor, what should I expect and what should I do? He said, stop drinking. Immediately stop drinking. That's the only thing he said, which I listened for a couple of year and a half or so. Go ahead and sneeze.
Excuse me, everybody.
Oh, bless you. I listened to him for a year and a half, but that was really, really hard. And I battled with it every day because all of my friends were still drinking and partying, and I was still at the party or at the situations with a lot of times nothing else to do. There was no escape. I was also, so we, I want to try to keep it on track here, but so with that chronic pancreatitis, I was afraid that since it no longer hurt and since I was already on enzymes, which with chronic pancreatitis, you may end up having to take enzymes to help with digestion, that, okay, what else? Well, there's a possibility or the eventual development of diabetes. Okay, so I got to make sure I don't get diabetes now. And as how do you know? Well, you go to the doctor, but I didn't want to go to the doctor. So, but anyway, so I started, I eventually did decide that I cannot go on with this chronic pancreatitis because by the time I start to realize or feel it or see it, it might be too late. It might be too late to make any changes or to get better. So I did pick up and go back to the CF team. Coincided with realizing that my pulmonary function test had dropped down and got all the way down to like 72%, I think, which is still functional. And for somebody that's been well below 70s, that's a good mark. For me, I wasn't really pleased with that, and I had become overweight. And now, after I started seeing them, when we were looking at my glucose, my glucose numbers were high. My fasting glucose numbers were in the 120s to 130s. My A1C was took me into pre-diabetic. I was at 5.8, so 5.7 and above is pre-diabetic. 6.5, I believe, is full-blown diabetic. And again, like I did not want to be diabetic, and they didn't know what to tell me. Like, Joe, this could be a CF related diabetes, CFRD, or it could be type 2. So they just put me on insulin. Like, here, you're going to start shooting insulin after every meal. Because they had told me for months, like we've been watching this for a few months by this point, and diet, exercise, lifestyle, change it, get better. Okay, I'd show up. Yeah, doc, I started exercising. I went to the gym last week. I went to the gym, once a week, maybe once every other week. Diet was still terrible. Now, I did stop drinking and got kind of out of that party, which was really because of, again, all the guilt that I was walking around. I knew that I needed to stop, and I did want to stop. I had phone numbers in my phone to call for help if you needed help and to get into a program. But I needed something else. I needed more, and that's when I got my second DUI, that I realized, okay.
Wait, just to put things into perspective and so people follow. So, your suspicions were correct. You knew that you were making these poor lifestyle choices. Your sugar's out of whack. You're beginning to move towards obesity. Your lung function is beginning to decrease, the pancreatitis and all of that. So at this point, when you're starting to go to the gym and you've received the information, you're like, oh, fuck, I don't want this to continue. I don't want to die in early age or live, suffering more than I have to with type 2 diabetes, which is 100% reversible and preventable. And you're saying that you knew that you needed to quit alcohol. At what point then did you receive the 1 or 2 DUIs? And you don't have to go into, as much detail as you're comfortable with. Like, what was the timeline coinciding with going to the doctors, finally getting yourself back on track, at least getting the information and realizing I have a fucking problem here.
Right.
Just like paint that picture and so that we can understand the timeline.
Yeah. So I graduated high school in 2002, graduated college in 2007, became a physical therapist assistant in 2007. Started partying, like I said, at 16 years old. So we can play that into the time. But in 2011, got my first DUI. And I've been working for 4 years at the same place out of college, and then ended up losing that job a few weeks later. They knew about the DUI, but little Joe couldn't even get to work on time sober, let alone, so I ended up losing that job, moving on. Took a traveling job, continued to party. Like, realistically, I got out of town. I did what a good alcoholic does, and they change the scene. They get out of town. Did that for a while, came back to home, and then got a job, got resettled back in, and it was during that time, that period of time, that I did take a year and a half off of alcohol. It was probably so DUI 2011, was out of town for up to almost 2 years, came back, settled in, and then took a year and a half off of drinking. And then I ended up picking it back up, and then went on for another couple of years until 2018 when the second DUI came. And that would have put me at 34 years old.
And at that point, were you still making poor lifestyle choices? Were they like completely interrelated
They were, I would say they were interrelated.
until you had the big moment of awakening?
So I had come back to the doctor by that point. I had come back to the CF and established myself with the CF team. That's why they're like, Joe, if you're smoking pot, you should probably like eat it if you're going to take it. And right. So the DUI happened. I quit drinking, and first, and I also want to share, because this is I think was really important, that I knew, again, guilty, knew I needed to change, didn't make any changes until something traumatic like that happened. The next day I came to work, I had missed a day of work. I came to work and faced up with my boss, and she was the first person that I ever admitted that I was struggling and had a problem with alcohol abuse. And she was super receptive, very helpful. She immediately connected me with her husband, who also was in recovery, was recovered for many, many, many years. And they do service, they help and go out to the jails and stuff. So he was instantly able to say, yeah, he'll sit down with you, just talk if you want to. He'll take you to a meeting if you want to. Anything you need, whatever you want, will help you do that. And I knew and was ready. I was ready to do whatever it took. At that point, I even told her, like, I will go to meetings. I want to go to counseling. I wanted to go to counseling myself for it and start just taking charge and taking action to change my life, because I couldn't keep going on like this. The other thing that she said to me that I do believe was life changing was that normal people don't get arrested 2 times. Because at that point I figured, well, anybody can get a DUI. Because who doesn't go out and have a couple of drinks, not even drunk, get pulled over, and then get a DUI? I was having more than that, so I wasn't in that category, but it can happen, certainly. Does it actually? Not as often as we probably want to tell ourselves, as alcoholics anyway. But normal people don't get arrested twice.
And the ramifications that you weren't really normal since you were born with this genetic condition.
Exactly.
So wrapping it back into how you have to be extra cautious, extra sensitive, and really take the precautionary and preventative measures to ensure that it doesn't evolve into a greater and bigger problem. So
right, yeah, and I'm sure that most people with a serious disease like I have are avoiding all of these substances. They're living and doing everything they can, and that's another part of my guilt, because I did not treat this as severe as it is. And I still feel guilty about the way I've lived and done things, and I feel sorry for the people that struggle worse than I. But there are those like me who just go out and do it because we're humans. This is what we do. We suffer from these addictions and these just things that make us do things that we know aren't very good. Sometimes we don't even know they're not very good. But
you had a change of heart, obviously, and something finally shifted mentally. Obviously, it has a lot to do with mindset, and sometimes it does take a crisis or some sort of huge awakening for you to actually begin to move towards a life you were meant to be living, a life full of happiness and health and wealth and the whole shebang. So, just take us now through that journey of, okay, so you went through these horrible things, you made these choices, no reason to feel guilty. It was a part of your story. It was a part of the learning process. It's part of the, inspiration where people can hear your story and then maybe make a change sooner than you did. But what was it, and how were you able to make these changes? What changes did you make, and how do you keep up now with making sure that these choices are suitable for you and your life and where you want to go?
So I came to that decision. I knew after that arrest, going back to my office and talking to my boss, I came to the decision that I needed to change, and I was going to change. It was time. That's the first step, making that decision. And as they say in the 12 steps, you admit that you have a problem. I did that and instantly felt different at that point. I committed to making the change. And these are the things that I try to tell people is you decide, then you commit and you act. You do those things and then the world changes. You have to make that decision though. You have to 100% make that decision. And that's what I did. I decided I was not going to drink anymore. Sure. All the times before that, I thought I decided, but I didn't really. Like I was at that time, I wasn't going to drink, or I was going to try to stop drinking. This time, I decided I was not going to drink anymore. I'm not going to get in trouble anymore. I'm going to do whatever it takes. So I decided, I committed, and then I started taking action immediately. Immediately. Don't hesitate. Couldn't hesitate because I had done that all too before. That day, I said, "Yep, let's go to a meeting." So I went to a meeting. And it wasn't the most fun experience, but I still stuck it out because I knew that things had to change, and I knew that this worked for people. So I started working the steps and doing the whole AA 12-step program. Then I knew that my body and needed to change as well. I wasn't happy, and I wasn't going to take this insulin. And again, I was bullheaded and stubborn. So I didn't start. They wrote me the prescription to start shooting insulin, and I didn't. I went back to myself and said, I'm going to get in shape. And I was in shape in high school. I was still playing tennis all throughout this time and got to be really good. So to me, it was like, yeah, still athletic, and you miss the problem when you're doing things. So, but I was still overweight, and I cut out alcohol, obviously. Then I cut out soda of all kinds, regular soda as well as diet soda, and cut out cakes and cookies and all the sweet stuff. I started eating a colorful salad every day for lunch. I would take it in, I would chop up my peppers, chop up my purple onions or red onions, and put everything in there to have all these different colors. And it was amazing how after I did that for a while, I started to crave and literally see the colors. I could see that colorful salad in my craving, and it was very good. Then dinners and everything, I cut out the rice and pasta. I wasn't a big pasta eater, but rice I loved. I just substituted that with cauliflowered rice or riced cauliflower, however you call that stuff, and I got the weight to come off. I couldn't drive for a while, so I had to get a ride to work with somebody who started work an hour before I started work. That led me to be able to go right to the gym before work and start doing that. It gave me the opportunity to make a habit. And as soon as I was so excited because I got back into it. Literally, what a lot of people have found out, when you stop drinking, you pick up kind of where you left off when you started drinking. Or to look at it in another way, you stop growing. You stop growing when you start drinking. So you stop maturing when you start drinking. So I was still acting and behaving like a 16-year-old kid with all of my actions and decisions. But the neat part was when I stopped, I was able to pick it back up where that 16-year-old left off. Again, I played football in high school and was on the weightlifting team in high school. I was very athletic and physique oriented. So I wanted to be big and strong. And when I started lifting weights again and stopped drinking, God, that feeling came back. And again, I wanted to get that physique, and I wanted to be ripped and just athletic. And
So you begin to find that spark again, ignite
found that
that
spark.
passion,
Yeah.
and find that higher calling
Right.
towards.
So I couldn't wait to get my license back and go to the gym even earlier in the morning, so that I could spend as much time as I wanted there, because I couldn't ask my friend and coworker to bring me in that much earlier. So I started doing that. And I will say I was never big into running, even in high school and all the times. I did it because it was part of the training. But I was invited to do a 5K, and when I finally did that, I was happy to get in fifth place for my age. Fifth place for my age with cystic fibrosis made me feel really good, but also I wanted to beat those other four guys because I didn't really train that much for this race. So I started doing more running and lifting, and just not liking the running, that I needed something to combine the two. And we mentioned earlier the Spartan races. That's when I found Spartan and obstacle course racing. I was listening to podcasts at this time as well. This is right around 20 or in 2020, and podcasting had really taken a new blow up. And I would hear talks with Navy SEALs and David Goggins and people that were just very inspirational. And then came Joe DeSena talking about these different obstacles and races, and I said, boy, that's the kind of difficult, that's the kind of challenge that I would be able to do, because I can't become a Navy SEAL. I'm too old to get into the military and really to do what these guys had done, which to me, maybe it's sick, but the training and all that they did sounded really fun and really cool. Like I respect the hell out of those guys, and certainly for their commitment to the country. But to have the opportunity to do something similar by running across an obstacle course, climbing over walls, crawling under barbed wire, carrying heavy ass shit, that was it. That was it. So I signed. I found one in Tampa, or I'm sorry, it was in Kissimmee, and it signed up and went and did it, and instantly was like, oh yeah, that's it. That is my new focus now, my new
Your new
drive, my
obsession.
new obsession. And again, with that addictive personality, that's what we do. We obsess over something and we run full steam ahead with that. I did it with tennis for all those years. Now tennis is on the back burner because Spartan racing, obstacle course racing, as you mentioned, became a brand ambassador to promote the company, to help other people get off the couch and to get into shape and do everything. And that's what brings us here today.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing. So, making these changes one step at a time, starting with the mental, emotional aspects, getting the support through community, as you mentioned, through the AA program, and then, looking at your diet and not wanting to take the insulin and rebelling in a sense, once again, this time against authoritative figures when it comes to this like potential future medical diagnosis, saying, no, I'm going to take my power back. I'm going to make these necessary changes. I'm going to cut the processed shit, the sugar, the sodas, the things that are killing me slowly. You began to care more about your health, and then came in the physical aspect. Obviously, it's a mind, body, spirit endeavor to really, truly set yourself on a new path. So, obviously, getting back into the working out, igniting that passion, following your desires and dreams to do hard shit to build resilience. You found the obstacle course racing and full speed ahead to train for those races and show yourself, I can do this for my health and for myself every single day. And then you started to take in the information through the podcast. That's why we love podcasts and podcasting, because there's a lot of free information out there, words of wisdom from experts and thought leaders and people who have been through hell and back, sharing their stories and hopefully changing the lives of others. Even maybe just one sentence that they say can set you off on a new trajectory. So, in addition to developing these healthier habits and beginning to make these changes and seeing the results, and not saying that it was easy or that it all happened overnight, what else is there anything else that you implemented as part of this lifestyle and dietary change, the changes that you were making that you'd like to discuss?
Yeah, I think the only other thing that I did was just the research, just the learning. If you don't know, how can you make a change? If you don't know and understand what is actually happening in the body, how are you going to make a change? So that was something that I started doing as well. Like when I got a little bit, I wanted more. I got a little bit healthier, I wanted to be even more healthier. I got a little bit in shape, I wanted to be more in shape. And this is something as one of my younger years, I did not know enough and I did not understand. And maybe I would have got there if I would have continued on that trajectory, but I didn't. But the more I got into shape, the more I ate healthier. I wanted to eat more and more healthy. So I started exploring nutritional benefits of different foods, and such as like mushrooms, vegetables, different things. But learning all sorts of information that blew my mind, that is getting better. Like we're starting to get better at sharing this information with others and with the world. But up until I started looking for it, it wasn't there. It's not out there. It's not out there for normal people to see. Like you go to the store and you look at the stuff that's on the packaging and you see heart healthy or low fat or all these things that they put on the package to market and sell these things, you know, it's bullshit. In most cases, it's bullshit what they're putting on these, what they're putting in these foods, let alone on the package to make us buy it. So learning what was actually healthy, learning how the body d- uses the nutrition that we're taking in was vital and important. So
And I know
that's
it's also important and vital when you're working with other people and helping them and serving as a guide and a teacher and a mentor. And obviously, you want to walk your walk and make sure that you're educated and that you've walked the path. And I know there's no one size fits all for anybody. There's so much controversy, so many diets. There are some tenets or principles that I'm sure we can all agree on, but that's, a podcast at a later date and time. The point is that education is key, awareness. What is it that I need to change? How can I begin to educate myself? Taking in the information, then getting out there and having the actual experience through exploring different methods and means of changing, implementing different techniques and seeing what and what doesn't work. Because obviously, here on the Free Flowing Health podcast, we like to say that there's not one size fits all, but there's changes that anyone and everyone can be making towards achieving their specific goals. So, you mentioned something about kind of like getting into the swing of things and creating that momentum. So, what would you say to anybody? What advice or tip or tool can you leave anybody who's listening to this who might be struggling, even specifically with a form of cystic fibrosis, who hasn't had the courage to maybe exercise? And of course, I know they need to consult with their doctors, or maybe they're eating their way into a frenzy because they're trying to numb themselves, or they're trying to fit in as you once tried to do because of living this way and just feeling like an outcast and saying, hey, I can party, I can drink alcohol, I can smoke pot, or, these things that, of course, like we mentioned, everybody experiments, not everybody, but a lot of us experiment with at one point in life. So anybody struggling who may have are now where you have been at some point in your life, what is like one tip that you can give that person, that listener, that that hope, that inspiration, that courage to help them begin to create that awareness and move towards a direction that will bring them more health and happiness?
yeah. So the one tip I think I can give, or the best tip I think I can give, is to start with one thing. We can't change everything at once. We've seen it time and time again. You try to change everything all at one time, and then you end up changing nothing because it's really fucking hard. So look at what you're struggling with, and maybe you start with what's the worst, or what's the easiest thing to change. You got it, but you got to start somewhere. So as I said before, decide to change, commit, and then take action, and do it immediately. If it's dietary, if you're not eating really well, find out what's the worst thing you're eating, and then substitute that with something else. Or if that's too hard, start with something like, well, is it potato chips? I'm eating potato chips. So switch those potato chips for nuts or a healthier snack that you like. If it's physical, if you're not exercising or something, and then just do the most simple form of exercise we have that goes back eons. At walk. Start walking. Just go out for a walk. Do it a little bit. Then every week, try to just go a little bit further. You don't have to progress every single day, every single walk, but do what you can. Do it for a week. Do it for 4 or 5 days, whatever you can. And then every week, try to add to it, whether every single walk, whether that distance or time is longer, or whether you just add an extra day.
I find that that's great advice because a lot of times people feel so overwhelmed and they believe that they have to change everything overnight. And that's what causes a frenzy in their mind or causes them to quit completely because they feel hopeless. So I love that advice. And anyone can start anywhere with just one thing and build upon that and begin to build that momentum where they're seeing change, where they're beginning to feel better. And then you can, make a goal and maybe a month later add in a second change, whether it has to do with lifestyle or diet. I just want you to share with the audience what were the biggest lessons or the biggest lesson that you learned throughout all of your experiences. I know you mentioned a few times that you feel guilty in this and that, but it's not good or bad, right? It's all how we perceive our experiences, and they're meant for us to learn and grow. It's an opportunity always.
Right.
So if you can just share what it is, what your biggest takeaway was for yourself and that you'd like to share with others.
One of the biggest takeaways I have is that first, we tell ourselves a lot of things that may not be true. It, I thought everybody was partying, everybody was drinking, everybody was smoking pot. That wasn't true. That's not true. I was living in a life based upon what I thought was everything that everybody else did. But we create that to just make ourselves fit into our behavior. So break away from those. Like just anything that you believe to be true, reassess. At the very least, reassess that and step back from that and say and try something else. Do something and or believe something or believe or don't believe something. Don't believe what you do believe, or believe something else that you maybe didn't believe. I don't know. That sounds kind of
Like a
funny, but
flying penguin. So that's our team name for Spartans, and we have a little slogan we came up with on the back: making the impossible possible.
right. Yeah. So, there anything is possible. Like we can do so much more than we believe we're capable
Once
of.
we stop lying to ourselves and we reassess and we identify, okay, maybe this isn't the truth that we've been led to believe or that the story we've been making up in our head, once we let go of the lies, then really, truly anything is possible.
Right, exactly. We like I said, we tell ourselves these things to fit into our behaviors, but we don't have to. And it's a lot of these are not true. And it is possible to change. People say that people don't change, but here I was in my mid 30s, I fucking changed big time. It's possible. It's possible, and it's very doable. Uh, I did want to say, I mentioned a few minutes ago that change something easy if changing the hard thing is too much at first. But God, if I hadn't stopped drinking, all of this other stuff wouldn't have happened. So I do believe that is the most important thing that I changed. And it if without changing that, I probably wouldn't have done all of these other things just because of that maturity, that mindset, and then that growth afterwards was possible. I couldn't have done it if I was still getting drunk any nights of the week. So that I would focus on if that's your problem. If it's everything else, then it doesn't really matter where you start. Find something and change something. But please, if you're having struggles with abuse, of substance abuse, get help for that. Go wherever you need to
Professional
go.
help, right? Yes.
Professional help with that, or reach out. Like it does. Like if it's professional help or not. If you need professional help, certainly, but reach out to somebody that you know so that is willing to help. Like to my boss, or you can reach out even to me at cfitspartan.com or .com. It's not a what am I?
Yeah, we'll get there in a second.
Instagram.
Yeah.
Yeah. They will have my information. Like I'm more than happy to talk and help and listen to whatever capacity it needs to be.
But the message is that change is possible. And once we let go of our limiting beliefs and the stories, that we can then create space to step into that version of ourselves that was meant for us. So I really do love that. Two more questions before we conclude today. The second to last question is, how is your health now? I know that you often now stick with staying up to date on getting tested. We're all about optimizing our health through empirical evidence and getting the data to support, supplementation and or the choices that we're making. So, you've been through a lot. You're still dealing every day with your routine in relation to the cystic fibrosis. You've had a lot of struggles with your health. So now you put in the hard work and it's 5 years since your last DUI and having that wake up call. Can you just tell everybody the current status of your health, including, you went recently or twice at least in the last year to get your pulmonary, oh my God,
Pulmonary
pulmonary, oh my God. We got to cut
PFTs.
that. Okay, I'm going to cut that part out. So recently you went to get your PFTs tested and, you've gotten blood work done. So just tell the audience what the status of your health is.
So the PFTs, as I started to train and get back in shape, rose. They rose back up, and I'm back to 100%. That was even before getting on Trikafta, which is why it's incredible. The blood work and the weight, I lost 40 pounds and got my A1C down to 5.2. got my fasting sugars back under 100. So I'm out of that pre-diabetic range. So everything has stabilized after getting back and after taking charge, after taking control and doing the work.
And do you find that you have more energy, if your skin is clear, just any other like positive results of you making these changes that maybe we didn't discuss yet?
Yeah, I've got more energy to go through the day and I've got a clearer head to manage. It's difficult to say like how much of that is due to all of the changes. I mean, certainly it's due to all the changes, but I mean, you remember I was drinking a lot. So that was another big issue that would affect my clarity, my energy levels and everything. So as I got more in shape and as I did clean up the diet more and more and focused on things did get better. Like I continue to feel more energy, more clear headed, and
And then you
life.
met me.
And
Obviously,
then I
I've been
met
sober
you.
for over 10 years. I had my own struggles and my own battles. And one day we're going to have a reverse interview so the audience can really get to learn about me and my story. I've been pretty private over the years, but I think it's also important so that I can inspire people to make real changes as well. But it enabled us to get together and into an intimate relationship because, of course, one of my criteria was that my partner be sober. So that's just another positive outcome, right?
That's one of the biggest positive outcomes. That's right.
I just had to throw that out there. Okay, so my last question, and it's usually either the last question or second to last question for all of my guests, is when you hear the term free flowing health, what comes to mind and what does it mean to you?
So obviously, I've heard this question several times or numerous times. And to me, free flowing health or is living in freedom, living free from these issues that once held me down. You know, alcoholism, addiction, diabetes, overweight, and the lies that I would tell myself to fit into those behaviors. So, free flowing health to me is the ability to break those chains, move on from the old life that I was in, the old habits and lifestyle I was living, and doing the things that I want to do. Running Spartan races, getting outside, throwing the spear out back like we've got, but carrying, doing things and just enjoying life. We love going outside. We love hiking. We want to go do all of these. We have a lot of vacations this year, and I don't want to be. I don't want to spend my morning recovering from a night of partying. I want to be able to wake up and freely flow through the day without having to baby or to what do you nurse myself back to a functional state.
Ooh, I love that. I just love everybody's unique response to that and how they interpret it. So thank you for that. And yeah, anybody listening, if you want to get in touch with Joe, he does work one-on-one with people, both as a physical trainer and as a lifestyle coach, and those services are available remotely. Also, if you're ever visiting the Southwest Florida area and you're looking to hop onto the water, he's the owner and operator of a mobile kayaking business where he brings the kayak to you. It's very convenient, especially if you're staying on a vacation rental on the water. Obviously, Joe has his full-time job, but does make time to work with people and is so passionate about that and has so much wisdom and actual experience to offer and has seen so many of his clients grow and change in incredible ways. So that being said, Joe, how can people get a hold of you? I know you stumbled over your words earlier. I know because you're not so much of an Instagram person, but if somebody wanted to contact you and get in touch, how can they do that?
So you mentioned the See Me Paddle, so you can go to See Me Paddle, that's SEA, See Me Paddle, SWFL.com.
It'll be in
So
the show notes too. Don't worry, everyone.
to book a reservation there, and or you can see me on CFit or CF Fit Spartan. That's CF underscore it Spartan on Instagram, as well as Facebook, same name, CFit Spartan. You can also find my other regular Joe Boris on Facebook. So both of those, you can contact me through there.
Great. So, yeah, we'll encourage our audience members to reach out if they resonate with your story, if they have any questions. And we didn't even get into the physical aspect of what you do with the training and stuff and how you've helped so many people really improve their physical physique and their strength and their endurance. Again, because we just wanted to focus on highlighting your story your struggles, talking about cystic fibrosis. And as with many of my guests, I'm sure I'm going to have you back on. We do live in the same household to
Yep.
cover additional topics more specifically so we can dive deeper. So it's always fun, though, just to highlight people's stories and see how they serve as a source of inspiration. So thank you so much for being here, for being open, for being raw, real, vulnerable. Definitely appreciate your time because there's a lot of other things you could be doing. So thank you, Joe, so much for sharing your story so candidly.
Absolutely. You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
And any last words for the...
This was a lot of fun, and I'm happy to be here. I'm sure I'm going to be back on the show from time to time, so we'll speak again soon. But lastly, just again, anybody struggling with CF, struggling with addiction, go after the help you need. Reach out to me if you have any questions or just want to talk about it further. You know, I'm here to listen. I'm here to talk.
Thank you, Joe, and thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Free Flowing Health podcast. Your support means the world to us. Help us grow by leaving a positive rating and review. Make sure to subscribe, like, and share this podcast. If you'd like to stay connected, you can find me on social media at Free Flowing Health or visit my website directly, freeflowinghealth.com. Wishing you a happy, healthy, and fulfilling life. Till the next time.
This podcast is intended for entertainment and informational purposes only and should not be considered legal, health, or professional advice. We are not responsible for any losses, damages, or liabilities that may arise from the use of this podcast. This podcast is not intended to replace professional or medical advice. Views and opinions expressed by the guest are those of the guests and do not necessarily reflect the view of the host or the Free Flowing Health team.